This session, as you can tell, is Healthcare AI Revolution is here. And what I'm hoping we'll be able to do with our panelists is give you a little bit of a sense, not just about all of the buzzwords that you've heard in AI, all of the promise of AI, but a little bit more about what AI is actually doing today in healthcare with a focus sort of on ROI and results and metrics and those sorts of things. So just real quickly, I'm Mark Parody, principal and founder of Siam Consulting. I've got about 25, 35 years in data analytics, AI, and the rest of it. I want to go and give a sort of a quick thanks to the Scale Healthcare people for putting this conference together and all of the wonderful sponsors as well. And with that, I'd sort of like to just dive into it. I'm going to ask each panel member sort of a brief introductory question. I'll let them tell you a little bit about themselves and what they do, and then we'll get into some of the more detailed questions. So, Amy, since you're right here to my left, I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about your role at Oracle and sort of the clinician-first product approach that Oracle is now taking.
Sure. Morning. Thanks for inviting me. My name's Amy Wilson. I'm a nurse by background. Go Bills, based out of Buffalo, New York, even though we had a rough game last night. I currently work at Oracle and the GBU called Oracle Health. And so what that means is that in 2022, Oracle bought Cerner Corporation. And for the last 3 years, what we've been doing is taking a platform. All of the EHR platforms aren't really fit for purpose for AI. So for the last 3 years, we've really been developing a platform that is AI enabled at every level. And I currently am a senior director inside of our product development focused on AI and a next generational EHR.
Harry, I'd like you to go next, obviously next in the row, and maybe also talk a little bit about, obviously, Kleene and the company you founded there, but who Kleene serves, what you sort of automate, and perhaps some of the hard results from your early deployments here in the U.S.
Go Giants. We won the Patriot for first time, I think, for quite a while. Perry is CEO, founder of Kleene. So we are a chronic disease management platform. So basically, we started about 5 years ago building a chronic care management platform. And when AI became an electricity, we just plugged it in and doing a bunch of magics to increase ROI, create better outcomes. And the rest we'll discuss here. I want to thank Scale for putting this together. And this is great. Thank you.
All right, perfect. So we'll go on to Amir next. And also, as sort of the money on the panel here today, maybe talk a little bit about Healthier Capital's lens, how it's a little different perhaps than some of the other firms that are out there, what you think about from an investment criteria, sort of what stages you invest in, and what technology, AI technology powered means to you.
Great. Well, amazing to be on this panel with amazing colleagues and great to be here. Really enjoyed the conversations. And so I'm Amir. I run a venture firm called Healthier Capital. Prior to this, I was running a company called One Medical in the primary care space that we took it public and then we became part of Amazon. I spent a year lifting boxes on and off trucks and it was too hard on the knees and I got into venture capital. And before that, I was at the other places y'all were griping about. I was at Optum for a bit as an executive vice president and I was CEO at Stanford University's healthcare and COO at UCLA's health system. So I've been in kind of medical groups. People called it the dark side. I called it the gray side, the option. We could debate that. And now at Healthier Capital, we're investing in healthcare software and services and hopefully the kind of things that can help you all in your work and kind of lessons learned from years in both health systems plans and certainly on the provider side. Maybe I'll leave it at that and I'll talk about what makes a good investment subsequently. But great to be here and great to be here with Roy and Jason and the team at Scale. Super fun to see this group together as you all are doing the hard work, as you heard on that last panel, of trying to make it happen, which is not easy. And I will say this, I'll talk about one thing about criteria on investments. At the end of the day, it's can you get it done? You know, and I'll talk a lot about AI and the power of AI, but at the end of the day, what distinguishes I think the better companies from the less better companies is can they get it done? Can you execute? At the end of the day, it'll be like a website. It'll be a utility. You'll plug it in and there'll be people who'll make a lot of money running those utilities, granted, but execution and leadership, I still think is a key part of the difference.
Fantastic. Thanks, Amir. Joe, I'd love for you to introduce yourself, maybe also introduce Jade, your company a little bit, talk about the value prop there and any ROI proof points you've got.
Yeah. So, hi, I'm Joe Corkery, CEO and co-founder of Jade Health. We built Jade Health after leaving Google a couple years ago to basically provide AI-driven interpretation and translation services for patients and providers who don't speak the same language. It's been, a very exciting journey. I think in terms of ROI, a lot of the ROI we've seen comes in sort of two different buckets. On the spoken interpretation side, it really comes around to enabling a lot more conversations that these patients are not having right now, especially. And so we look at like the different touch points, especially for inpatients. How often is that person being seen? It really changes dramatically when you actually make access to language services very easy and sort of streamlined. On the written translation side, one of the things that we've seen is this big impact on time to discharge, because oftentimes patients are waiting to get their discharge instructions translated. And, we've seen at least one hospital that takes a process that goes from, for someone who's actually doing it in-house, 2 hours down to about 5 minutes. For others, they're pointing a turnaround. It's often days. So we're really excited about the potential for impact.
Perfect. And maybe just sticking with you, Joe, as we sort of dive into the deeper questions. So certainly one of the concerns about the AI revolution, right, is disparity, right, equity, access. And we really can't exacerbate those issues, right? And so talking to a room full of MSOs and compliance officers and that sort of thing, how do you think about auditability from that standpoint? How does Jade begin to help address some of those issues? And how can you really think about scaling and keeping a human in the loop as part of your process?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I think that it comes to, there are a number of factors that are relevant here. I think one, when your point about equity here is like, one of the things that we're doing is we're actually using AI to serve a population that has historically very bad equity disparities across that organization. But we really focus on how can we make AI serve this population better and really think about how do we go even further for each of those, like I think to really understand those balances, whether it's understanding like regional differences as well. I think that's an area where there's a lot of opportunity for impact. I think when you get to the topic of like human in the loop, that's a really interesting scenario, because there are times where, I think the goal here is we get to a place where you don't need a human in the loop for most of these interactions. But the reality is that, there's both a need and desire to have a human in the loop for a lot of these interactions in the short term. And then it really becomes a question of where is it appropriate to use with a human in the loop and where it's appropriate to use it without. And one of the things that we see, so like on spoken interpretation, you see a lot of organizations saying, well, okay, like a front desk interaction, check-in, scheduling, billing, I don't need a human in the loop to facilitate those conversations. But, if I'm doing a clinical interview or I'm doing a consent or surgical planning, yes, I'm going to want a human in the loop. And so having the ability to either start with AI and escalate to a human or just go to a human directly in those scenarios is super valuable. But we're seeing something similar on the written side of things, where most like discharge instructions are really complicated. And so right now we see a lot of the work there it's done is the software is actually operated by fluent speakers to generate the translations. And that gives them the ability to, instead of spending 2 hours generating a translation from scratch, do it in about 5 minutes, and they can just quickly scan through. And we put a lot of tools in place to make it easy for them to understand how to do that. But, on the same side, we're also seeing this push to say, well, there are a lot of use cases where you don't need a human in the loop. And then you get to this question about how do you do accountability? And because a lot of the requirements there is like, well, you should have human review of these. And so one of the things that we do with a lot of our partners is we actually give them the ability to basically go back and sample data with, so that their groups, so they're like, well, we're going to send you home with these instructions. And then over the next week, we're going to review them to make sure there are no inaccuracies. And then they can follow up if there are. But it's also this process of like, you have to say like, okay, you provide them the instructions in English, you provide them, in their target language, a disclaimer in that target language saying English is the reference. If you don't understand, go back to that or call us at this number. And then doing the auditing after the fact for quality there. And that's actually a really good tool, because that allows you to actually improve the models over time as well. But so far, we've been pretty excited. There's been no need to follow up with the patient based on the translations yet.
Yeah, no, and I think that's really interesting. So one of the, I think, sort of unfair standards that we hold AI to is it has to be 100% perfect. It can't ever make a mistake, right? And when you think about translation services, right, and certainly something like Spanish, as I'm sure you all know, there's not one Spanish, right? There's many, and they're very, very different. And so you may well have a human translator who's more fluent in, say, the Puerto Rican version, and then having trouble working with Colombian, right, or something along those lines. And so I think understanding, and sort of especially in your field with what you're looking at, where we're not necessarily making clinical decisions, right, during the surgery or that sort of thing, that's a standard that could perhaps be relaxed a bit, and recognize that the humans are going to make mistakes as well, right? And that should be the appropriate comparator, not has AI ever made a mistake, right? But what is the mistake rate that humans make, the error rate that they make? How do we address that? Fantastic. Thank you. So Amir, I'd like to go to you now. And, so we talked a little bit, you'll get into a little bit more some of your thoughts on your investment strategy and your thesis, right? But obviously clinical safety is important, right? A repeatable unit economics, right, is important. How do you do enterprise integration, right? These are all sort of key aspects, right? When you're looking at a company, and are you going to invest in them or not? And so I'd love for you to maybe expand on that a little bit, right? As well as, are there any red flags, right? Big red flags, regardless of how well it looks like the company is doing. When you see that type of a flag, you're going to pass on the opportunity.
Well, we at Healthier Capital, we start with the problem statement. Even though we're doing a lot of investments in AI and tech and software, it's less about AI and tech and software and more it's what's the problem. And so we look at the key stakeholders in healthcare and say, what problems do they have, and can we help solve those problems? So on the demand side, the consumer has problems with access, wait times, experience, other problems. The payer has problems with costs and waste and medical inflation. And then we have challenges on the supply side, if you will, with workflow and staffing and burnout and coordination of care. So we're looking for solutions to those problems, and that's where it starts. Then as you start looking for the solutions to those problems, yes, is it something that people love? Does it delight the customer? Is it something that can be deployed readily? Can it be done at scale? Is there an outstanding team? From an investment perspective, how's the price to invest in it? Is it going to burn a lot of cash? But it really starts with the problem statement.